everyone, Babs Hockey here with the first ever Player Coach podcast. Here I'll illustrate different perspectives from a player and a coach and give you the latest in hockey IQ development so you can make better decisions and take your game to that next level. Now today I want to talk about the two most dangerous words in development. The first is never, the second is always. When you hear coaches or players say never and always at a frequent rate, or they say it all the time, they typically struggle to understand what is actually going on, or they just don't want to explain the why. And this is an easy tactic to stall for time or to get players to do what you want. But long term, there's some real issues with this. When you hear this a lot, and this can be used in any context, when you're hearing the always and never frequently, it tends to be a trigger for you to ask a couple more questions or just get a little bit more insight on what the task is at hand. And so when you're in development, I get a lot of players that will come to me and they'll say, I've been always told to do this. I was told to never do this. And I go, okay, well, why? And then I just get a blank stare at me. They just stare at me and go, I don't know. They just told me never do it. So I listened. And it's good that they were listening. But the problem is we don't want to develop drone hockey players. My buddy Jason Yee really coined the phrase drone hockey players. And I really do agree with him in that context that we hear this a lot, like you should never do this, you should always do this. And the problem is now you're starting to build drones. You're building players that are just going from point A to B. They're turning into robots. And we don't want robots when we're playing. Like the best players in the game are creative. And so they understand the why and they can go out and play free without fear. And when you start using the words never and always all the time, it becomes this very slippery slope where you just don't know where it's going to end. You're going to really handcuff the player long term. And so it's on the player as well to ask why. So a coach may use it. Again, there's lots of players they might be teaching, and it's easier to just be like, okay, we always want you to do this. And then on the side, when the drill's going, when you're on a break, you can ask them like, hey, so why does it always need to be like this? And like, okay, well, understand, or maybe after the practice, just have a discussion. And it's a quick talk. It's something easy, but it'll help you understand exactly why you're doing something. And this way you don't run into this long-term problem. And so it falls into this like symptom or Band-Aid structure where, okay, these players aren't doing what I'm asking. I'm just going to say never and always. Or another player is going to be like, okay, I can't get this done right. I can't get the puck to the net, so I'm just always going to do this. And when they get in this mindset, it works short term, but long term, you have a very dangerous road where now you're going to handcuff yourself. You're not going to be able to play creatively, openly. And so you end up in this drone type hockey player or this robotic types where you're just going from point A to B and not really thinking creatively. And so we want to avoid this as much as possible. We want to avoid the always and never when in terms of teaching or as a player, you don't want to be stuck using these terms when you're thinking about your game. So when you start seeing a player that says, okay, I can never do this, so I'm always going to just cut back on this situation. Now they're not. Now they're going to lock their options up. They're going to be very limited, and most likely they're probably going to be very easy to read from a defender standpoint. So it'll work once in a while, but for the most part, they're going to be very easy to defend. And so we want to work to cut these words out of our terminology because the problem is for most times we tend to use them as absolute truths. And that's another thing we have to really be weary of. There are no real absolute truths, especially in hockey. Everything's always growing and changing. As you've seen in shooting, it used to be roll your wrists over all the time with the old wooden hockey sticks. A lot of younger players probably won't can't really relate to this one, but when you use wooden sticks, that was the way to leverage and get some more power. You want to roll your wrists and point where you're trying to shoot the puck. And then as the sticks evolved, you didn't want to roll your wrists anymore. You wanted to let the sticks do the work and have a more open blade, very similar to how Tarasenko shoots. But now as sticks have evolved even more, the technology's become even better. Now you can roll your wrists again, and depending on the context, and everything's changed now. And now it's more specific to the individual. Everyone has a unique release and they shoot a little differently. And that's part of the progression as technology's grown, as the game's evolved. Now it turned from this absolute truth with the wooden sticks, it was very one-dimensional, to now you have this advanced technology where almost every player, as you talk to goalies, the top-end players all have a slightly different release, and they shoot just a little bit differently to really optimize what fits their style of play or fits their mechanics. Now, are there core base mechanics underlying all shots? Of course, yeah, there's distinct patterns there, but once the shot's released, every player has a little bit of a different release point. And so that's what makes them unique, and that's what gives them a competitive advantage. And so this creativity and understanding that there's multiple avenues to growth and development is really the key here. And that's why the usage of the word never and always as a coach or as a player is very dangerous, because it's going to lock you up and turn you into this drone robotic hockey player. We want to create options. Like, we want to be able to see the game from different avenues, be creative, create new and inventful ways to score goals and create offense. Now, there is a time for always and never. And in my practice with developing players, I call it spectrum development. And it depends if a player is deficient in a specific area, or they came to me and they were taught to always do something one way. Now, the easiest way to get them to find that sweet spot is, first, they have to understand the other extreme side. And so I'll tell a player, for instance, when we're working on core mechanics for stick handling, most players now, they really struggle with a good bottom hand grip. The top hand was a big focus where it was, okay, the top hand does everything. Let's get a little roller in the bottom hand so it's nice and loose, and just slide the hand up and down the stick all the time and really work on that mobility. And so the focus was top hand. We really want to develop that top hand. But now a lot of players that I get, they have no bottom hand grip. So now it takes them a little bit longer to shoot, and it's a real struggle to get them to understand, like, you still need to have a good firm grip when you're doing certain stick handling moves. If you just have a loose grip all the time because of this always type word that the always was always used in their development, it became a struggle. And so now it helped them early on, but now when they're getting to work with me, they get to this higher level. Now they can't get a quick release off, or the puck seems to roll off their stick when they're trying to do sharp, quick movements off of what I call an optional handle. They're not in an optional position. And I talk about this in the Hockey IQ course, and when developing players' IQ, is you want to be in an optional position. You want to always, at the end of the day, have two options. And again, you see me use the word always. When I say always, it means to have two options. You want to have multiple options. Will there be scenarios where you only have one? Yes. But if you're in a situation where you're getting stuck with one option consistently, that means you're putting yourself in a non-optimal position to create offense. So that's why if we strive to work to get to two options as much as possible when we're playing the game, that's going to ensure we're going to have different options and be able to maximize our offensive skills versus pigeonholing ourselves into just doing one option or being stuck to one play all the time. And that's where you're going to run into some trouble there. And so back to this spectrum development, when we're working with an athlete that is struggling with that bottom hand grip, we'll say, okay, for these 3 drills, I want you to have a super tight grip. I want you just to have it as hard as possible and work on just how does it feel to stick handle with a strong, tight bottom hand grip? And so they'll work through the drills. And then as they get more comfortable and start to feel the difference, and now they have access to that ability, now they have two options, like I talk about with the Hockey IQ. We want to work to be in that optional position. Now I can slide my bottom hand if I have to reach and get around someone. But because I know how to use my bottom hand grip now and use it with my stick handling, I can make that quick pass or make that quick shot because I have a good firm grip. And so we want to think of it as like a spectrum. One end, we have never having a good bottom hand grip. The other end, we have a super tight, always stiff bottom hand grip. And that's what you saw a lot of players used to just be stuck with that. And they just push off their bottom hand when they shoot and stick handle, and then they have no top hand ability. And so we want to find the middle, that sweet spot. And so when players are able to access that, now they're in an optional position. Now they have two options more times than not. And now they have access to maximizing their offensive opportunities and creating offense. They essentially become more deceptive, because if you're in a position and it's only one way, you can only take this one option, you become very predictable. Now, there's a time and a place for that, especially under pressure in your own zone. But these are isolated incidences. These are very specific situations. For the most part, if you're attacking with two options, defensemen are less likely to lunge at you or angle you off. And if they do, you can access that second option to attack that open space versus being stuck in one position all the time. So to close the podcast, we want to make sure we understand the two most dangerous words in development are always and never. As a coach, we want to avoid them because, again, we don't want to have this short-term satisfaction, but long-term problems with the players. And from a player perspective, we don't want to get stuck in this one option and stuck only going one way or never going to take a puck a certain way because we're not good at it. We need to understand the why from both perspectives. And when we do that, we're going to be able to amplify our skill development, really unlock our potential as a player and being more creative, avoid being a drone and a robot, and really take that game to that next level. So thanks for listening to me. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast, really taking a big investment and interest in your own development. And so I want to remind you again, I have the IQGame course available now. Now, this is an innovative step-by-step process where it develops hockey IQ through understanding the core principles, pattern recognition, and then making optimal decisions so you can create more offense and score more goals. Then I offer remote training off and on ice, where we work on core skills, give a player assessment, and really use video analysis to identify the core weaknesses in your game and the things that you do well so we can amplify that. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for the next podcast next week to take your game to that next level.